Good evening tonight, folks. Thrash Pondo here, and I'm here with another installment of my special offer that I'm extending to all my new members, and that is you subscribe to my channel, and I'll do a post on whichever topic you choose. And today is something of a tall order. I'm going to try to get all in one enchilada. It's a retrospect on all 6 of the original Star Trek films. I might make this installment one. We'll see how I feel at the midsection, let's say. Now, I'm going to do something a little, well, there's nothing particularly odd about it. I'm going to start with the 3 that I don't particularly care for, and then end on the 3 that I do particularly care for. And I bet all you Trekkies out there know the direction this is going. Yes, I'm going to start with the even-numbered films, particularly Episode 1. Now, you have to remember just how impactful this was. The TV show had been canceled 10 years prior. We Trekkies had been around for years waiting for something new. We had that animated series, which is wonderful, but the idea of a feature-length film was something, well, really, really anticipated. And sadly, when we got it, it did not really meet our expectations. I mean, effectively what it is, it's a retelling of the original series episode, The Changeling, only not as particularly interesting. It just seemed to be missing something. Now, in its fairness, it probably had something to do with the fact it went through massive, massive rewrites. I mean, every science fiction great at the time had their hand in that pie. I know Harlan Ellison, who swore he'd never do another Star Trek anything, contributed. And there's a very wonderful story where he submits a script, and they decide that they have to spice it up with Chariots of the Gods, which was still fairly new at the time. And they said, hey, how about incorporating the Mayans? And Harlan Ellison goes, the Mayans? What do the Mayans have to do with my story? Well, apparently nothing. He said he'd get back to them, they never got back to him, and, well, it just sort of moved on. It wasn't a bad script, but you could tell it went through many, many rewrites and suffered from it. I did like the fact they got the whole cast back together, and I liked some of the additions, particularly Persis Kambata, who actually does one of my favorite schlock sci-fi films, Warriors of the Wasteland, otherwise known as Phoenix the Warrior. But you'll have to see that on one of my earlier posts. Moving forward, I'll go on to Star Trek 3. Now, this one, I got to admit, is my favorite of the 3. One thing that it did was it realized the fact you don't need just a solid story. You have to have a solid villain. And this one really did. Christopher Lloyd, as the Klingon commander, was just amazing. I thought it did a few things where I thought it kind of pinned itself in the corner. One thing I didn't like was it had the worst of the 2 Saviks. Apparently, Christy Alley was offered even less money for her second film than she was for the first, so she backed out. They got somebody new. The person they got didn't quite seem to understand what a Vulcan was. I understand they're not supposed to have emotion, but they certainly inflict. And when she has to deliver that very, very painful scene where Kirk, who's just realized he has a son and now has to come to terms with the fact that the son has been killed, she reports it like this: Admiral, David is dead. And then, almost to make up for the lack of emotion, Kirk comes in and goes into his Shakespearean wall chewing, and first he misses the chair he's supposed to sit down in. And to this day, I'm not convinced that was intentional. I think there may have been an accident, they just left it in. But of course he's going to go, you Klingon bastard, you killed my son, you Klingon bastard. Yeah, we get it. It just, the whole thing was just, well, it was just tragically executed. I'm sorry. What could have been a really great scene didn't quite work. But again, Christopher Lloyd is great as the Klingon commander, and if you look very closely, John Larroquette, who is a perennial in TV and film, he also plays a Klingon, and he has a pretty good scene as well. So I got to tell you, of the odd-numbered Star Treks, 3 is probably my favorite. Oh, and by the way, it has one of the best lines of the entire franchise, and it's in Klingon. and I'm going to butcher it because I don't speak Klingon, and I apologize, but it's Kaba Bo Shodanek, which effectively translates to I wanted prisoners, which a friend of mine actually did it at a toast at my wedding, but that's another story. And we're going to move on now to my least favorite of the franchise, Star Trek V. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this one, again, because, well, I don't like it. Most people don't. And if you do, that's fine, but there's really no need in talking about it. But I'm going to give a couple of reasons why I didn't like it. First of all, the characters that were just so underused, with the exception of William Shatner, who was so overused. And since he directed the film, I cannot help thinking that that was not a coincidence. Yes, I've always thought the film was a love letter to himself, but I shouldn't get too far off the rails here. I thought the Bach plot, where Spock has a brother we've never heard of before, is downright stupid. And another Klingon, I keep saying Klingon, another Vulcan that shows emotions. You could have gone in so many other and better directions that I just thought, well, it was completely unnecessary. And again, the dialogue was just downright tragic. I mean, the big line in the entire movie is, why would God need a starship? That's the best you can do for a catchphrase? I could do better than that. Oh, and that whole life is but a dream subplot coming back up at the end. A campfire song? You're going to get your bigger meaning from a campfire song? I'm sorry. You know what? I know a lot of Trekkies, and I know this film is considered canon. But a lot of the Trekkies I know, they simply ignore it. They go right from 4 to 6, and they just sort of, well, it's there, but we don't really need to reflect on it. And on that note, I'll move forward to, well, let me ask you. Do you guys want me to continue with part 2? Yeah, Bobby, what part 2? You're not tired of the sound of my voice? You really want me to tell you the good... Yeah, the good Star Trek films. Good. Well, okay. But while I have you here and have your attention, guess what I asked for? Yes. Come on, folks. Like, subscribe, forward, put on social platforms. Get friends to subscribe as well. My numbers are starting to crawl up. I know this because I'm making more and more commitments to doing more posts. So I know you're out there, folks. Join the party and get your own post. And now back to the action. So I'm going to pick up with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This is an excellent one. Much like Star Trek 1, this too is an extension of an episode from the original TV series. In this case, Space Seed. And in this case, they get it right. Khan comes in and chews up the scenery. He's got an enclave of fanatics that do his bidding. They try to take the Enterprise again, and hilarity ensues. I really thought this one kind of pulled everything together. It was a refreshing improvement from the first one. This one had action and a good story. And you know what? A great cast. There were some great supporting cast members here. Again, Kirstie Alley as Saavik. I thought she was great, and I wish she had gone on with the franchise. Paul Winfred, who is sort of a perennial in sci-fi horror. He was in Damnation Alley, one of my favorite cult sci-fi films, When Mars Attacks, Horror at 37,000 Feet, also with William Shatner. And speaking of Star Trek, he actually did an episode of Next Generation, one of my favorites, known as Darmak, which, if you haven't seen it, check it out. I don't want to give anything away here or get too far off topic. Oh, and of course, I'm going to butcher this poor guy's name, Marek Buttrick, who plays David, Kirk's very short-lived son. You might remember him from a very short-lived series from about 40 years ago about kids in Southern California called Square Pegs. He played the good-natured punk rocker dude who's, like, always totally tired. Like, totally. and he was very good as David in the very short scene he was available for. Now, moving forward, there was a lot of drama in this one as well. I remember the Mad magazine I had at the time made fun of it, where when Spock goes in to repair the engines, Kirk screams, "There's enough radiation in that room to kill 10,000 men." And Spock goes, "It's okay, Captain, I have gloves." And yes, he goes in with the gloves, and he does fix the engine but dies of radiation poisoning. And there's that very tragic scene where Kirk and Spock are on other sides of the glass and they're saying their goodbyes. And that could so have dipped into melodrama and become downright silly. And I thought they pulled it off very, very, very nicely. As well as, well, the eulogy for Spock towards the end, where Kirk gives that wonderful line of "all the souls I've ever known, his was the most human." That could have been done over the top, but he did it in a very, very subdued, tasteful manner, which I thought just made the whole scene. Many, many people have used that at the late, great Leonard Nimoy's actual eulogy, and I think what could be a more touching tribute. So, Star Trek II, definitely a good one. Moving on to Star Trek IV. Now, the Star Trek IV is kind of Star Trek's feel-good movie. They were kind of going in a different direction here. First of all, not their first time, but probably their most blatant time of tying in environmental issues and the whole save the whales bit. It's also part rom-com with Kirk and Dr. Jillian, but also part bromance with the return of Spock. There's that whole subplot about the whalers and them trying to thwart them. Again, trying to make the environmentalists the good guys in the galaxy. One thing that kind of threw me off a little bit, it's a time travel installment, and apart from sitting on the edge of forever, I try to steer clear of the time travel in anything. Much like in Rick and Morty, it's a game changer, and once you start at the slippery slope, and it raises more questions than it could ever answer. I did like it, and I'm glad they used it, so I'll give them a pass on that. But again, if they could travel in time then, why don't they travel it at times where they've had different problems? Maybe saving Spock in the first place. But don't get me started on that. All in all, I'd say it was a pretty solid episode. Possibly my least favorite of the good episodes, but still in the upper half. Which brings me to Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. This one's great, because this one was, much like some of the best installments they did, it was topical. It sort of is an allegory of the last days of the Cold War. Of course, the Klingons are the other side. And, of course, as the Cold War was closing, they do a Klingon Empire, which is also in its last days. And a lot of the events that take place had actual historic events which paralleled it, right down to the scene where Kirk is being tried, and the legal officer screams, "Don't wait for the translation, answer the question." That is right out of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And also, at this time, there were a number of dramas which actually played up on the concept, which again, Star Trek VI uses, where, while a lot of people are looking forward to a lasting peace, there were many parties that, for whatever reason, usually selfish reasons, didn't want that lasting peace, and there were intrigues to try to throw a wrench into this detente. I remember there were some Cold War films, The Package and Just Another Secret, which is about American and Russian agents working together to try to prolong the Cold War, and, well, let's just say it's a good thing it didn't happen. Or did it? Ooh. Anyway, most important though, it had one of my favorite villains of all time. Late great Christopher Plummer, R.I.P., as the Klingon commander. Absolutely wonderful. A Shakespeare-quoting Klingon commander badass who's actually really capable. What could be more fun with his whole "Cry havoc" and "Let's slip the dogs of war"? This one was my favorite. So, there you have it, in, as always, no particular order. I hope you enjoyed this retrospect. I hope I didn't forget anything. If did I crash? Oh, look, I crashed, and just in time. So anyway, I'm going